My family went on a cruise without me on my birthday, but I had a DNA test ready. I had started prepping weeks in advance. Not because I needed to, really, but because it mattered to me that everything was done just right. The tablecloth had been pressed and folded days before, same one from our wedding, pale ivory with delicate lace trim that never quite lay flat. I'd found it in the cedar chest next to the garter and my daughter's first drawing of a cat that looked more like a triangle with legs. Silverware new. I'd gone to 3 different stores just to find something that felt heavy in the hand, not the flimsy kind that bends with butter. The place cards were printed last week, each name in soft green ink on cardstock I'd chosen to match the eucalyptus centerpiece. I even had little embossed leaves on them, just a touch. Alex, Haley, Emma, Lucas, Sarah, my sister Suzanne and her husband, and sweet little Nicole, their niece. 8 cards, perfectly placed. I'd made the salad in the morning, spring mix with cranberries, feta, candied walnuts. Nothing fussy. I peeled the apples by hand. Candles, beeswax, long tapers, were in the silver holders I had polished the night before. They sat on the lace runner like they were born there. The roast was resting under foil in the oven. The sides were keeping warm on the back burner. Billy Joel spun gently on the record player, crackling slightly with that old, lived-in vinyl sound. I'd chosen scenes from an Italian restaurant to start with, because it always reminded me of college. It was 5:45 p.m. when I took off the apron. I changed into my best blouse, the one with the pearl buttons that Alex once said made me look like a senator's wife. I even did my hair, curled it at the ends the way Tom used to like. I looked in the mirror and thought, "You did good, Martha." The table glowed under the chandelier, napkins folded into tulips. Everything smelled like home, like holidays should. The kind where you remember the sound of laughter more than what was served. At 6 sharp, I stood by the front window. Porch light on. I kept the front door unlocked. I didn't want them fumbling with the key while carrying gifts or dessert or the little ones in their puffy coats. The clock clicked. 6:10. I walked into the kitchen, checked the oven temperature. Still holding. Billy Joel flipped to side B. 6:25. The ice in the bucket had started to sweat. At 6:40, I called. First Alex. No answer. Then Haley. Straight to voicemail. Suzanne's number rang twice before it cut off. I told myself they were running late, maybe stuck in traffic. Maybe Nicole had a tantrum, or someone spilled juice on a shirt. I sat down on the edge of the sofa, not really sitting, just hovering, waiting for the sound of the door, the burst of cold air and chatter. At 7:05, the last candle went out. They're long, but they don't last forever. I didn't relight them. I took the salad and sat at the head of the table. My name card stared back at me like it was apologizing. I picked at the greens. The cranberries were too tart. The feta too soft. The walnuts tasted like dust. I didn't cry. I didn't call again. I didn't text. I left the dishes where they were, the roast untouched in the oven. I turned off the record player and folded the place cards back into a neat little stack. I didn't throw them away. Maybe next year. Maybe never. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels like an echo. Like the house is trying to remember what it used to sound like. I hadn't really slept. I just lay there in bed with my eyes closed, body aching the way it does when you're too tired to rest. The kind of tired that isn't physical. It was just a dull throb in the chest, like grief trying to make room where it didn't belong. The house was still. Even the wind outside had nothing left to rattle. I got up around 6. Made coffee I didn't drink. Sat at the kitchen table in my robe, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold before I remembered to sip it. I opened the curtains just enough to see the edge of the yard, that faint blue-gray before dawn, and told myself not to look at my phone. Just one day, I thought. One day without that screen reminding me where I stand. But old habits die hard. I clicked it open without thinking. Swiped past the weather, an email from the pharmacy. Then Facebook. It was the first thing I saw. A post from Haley. Her profile picture had changed. One of those overly filtered ones where her eyes looked too bright, her skin unnaturally smooth. The caption read, "Finally, a real vacation with my loved ones. Family above all else." That was the first punch. The photo loaded slowly, like it was savoring the cruelty. A bright blue sea. Sunshine so sharp you could feel the heat just looking at it. A cruise ship deck, white railings, teak floor, fake palm trees and large ceramic pots. Alex was in a crisp white shirt, smiling the way he used to smile when he was 6 and won second place at the science fair. The kids were wearing matching dresses, lavender and yellow. Hair neatly brushed, cheeks pink from the sun. Haley had one hand on her hip, sunglasses perched just so, her other hand reaching back to hold Lucas's arm. Suzanne was there too, in a floral dress I hadn't seen before. Her husband stood behind her with his ever-perfect posture, and Nicole held a gelato with sprinkles. There were 10 or 11 people in the frame. I counted them. Twice. Not one of them looked behind the camera. It was like I didn't exist. I scrolled through the comments, not sure why. Maybe part of me hoped someone would say something. A neighbor, an old coworker, someone who remembered. But they didn't. It was all gorgeous family, so blessed. Look at those babies. Heart emojis. Sun emoji. Someone wrote, "This is what it's all about," and Haley liked that one first. Then Alex. Then Suzanne. I looked for my name. I even used the search function. Nothing. It was like I'd been erased. Not just forgotten. Edited out. As if I never ironed that tablecloth. Never baked those rolls. Never printed those cards with the tiny leaves. Never waited at the window watching headlights that never came. The worst part wasn't the photo. It wasn't even the lie of the caption. It was the absolute silence beneath it all. No one messaged me. No one called. No one thought to say, "Sorry we missed dinner," or "We should have told you." They posted a photo from another world, one where I wasn't needed. Not even worth mentioning. A different kind of holiday. A better kind, apparently. One without me. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink much. I just stared at the screen while the house stayed quiet around me. I didn't check the time, but it must have been hours. The coffee grew a film. The sun moved across the window and into the corner of the room. I didn't move. Just sat there with the screen glowing in my lap like a little portal to a life I no longer belonged to. A life I had built piece by piece. Holidays, birthdays, casseroles, emergency babysitting, late-night phone calls, until they decided they didn't need the architect anymore. They had each other. They had the sea. They had their photo. And I had the silence. It started with a drawer I hadn't opened in years, the one beneath the sewing machine where I kept old birthday cards, printed emails, letters that never made it to the fridge. The kind of drawer you open when the silence in your house feels heavier than usual. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe proof that I wasn't imagining things. Maybe just something to hold in my hands that hadn't come from a glowing screen. I pulled everything out, paper folded into awkward squares, envelopes with stamps already yellowing at the edges, notes from Alex when he was in college that still smelled faintly of laundry detergent and cheap ink. Somewhere near the bottom, I found the card I sent for Lucas's birthday 3 years ago. I'd written, "Happy 5th to our little explorer," in thick blue pen. At the time I thought I had mixed up the dates. I even apologized afterward when Haley called and said, gently but firmly, it was his 6th, Martha. But I hadn't been wrong. I knew that birthday as well as I knew my own. I was there when he was born, for God's sake. I was the one who drove Haley to the hospital while Alex was stuck on I-94 in construction traffic. I waited 6 hours in that beige lobby drinking stale coffee and praying that he had his father's eyes. I'd never once gotten his birthday wrong until that year. But they said I had, and I believed them. Because it was easier than believing the other thing. I set the card aside and opened my phone. Not out of habit this time, but with purpose. I scrolled back through messages, all the way to that second year. The school concert. They said it was canceled due to quarantine protocols, that the school wasn't allowing guests, and I nodded over the phone and said, "Of course, safety first." I even sent Emma a little bouquet of paper flowers I folded by hand. Watched the tracking link update as it made its way across the state. But a week later, I saw Haley's Instagram. She'd forgotten to block me from that one. There they were, seated in the school auditorium, row 4 center. Alex in a blazer, Suzanne beside him, smiling. Nicole was holding a program. There was a string quartet in the background. Emma wore a sparkly dress with tulle at the hem and sang into a microphone shaped like a snowflake. The caption read, "Proud of our little star." I didn't comment. I didn't message. I just stared at the photo until my eyes ached. That was when I first felt the doubt, that tiny needlepoint of unease. I told myself maybe it was a last-minute change. Maybe the school had lifted restrictions and they didn't have time to call. Maybe they assumed I wouldn't come anyway because of the weather. I gave them excuses. I gift-wrapped them, tied them with twine, and placed them gently in the corner of my mind where all the other disappointments lived. And then there was last Christmas. I baked the ham the night before, glazed it twice, wrapped it in foil. I made extra dinner rolls because Alex always took 3. I set out the red plates, the ones with the little reindeer etched into the rims, and arranged the centerpiece with pine cones and cinnamon sticks the way the kids used to love. I sat there with the lights on, the tree humming in the corner. It was 10:30 when I called. No answer. Haley texted at midnight. "So sorry, forgot to mention. Plans changed last minute. We're doing Christmas in Milwaukee this year. Didn't want to stress you with the drive. We'll call tomorrow." They never called. I remember sitting in my robe by the window, the ham cooling untouched, the wax from the red candles hardening into puddles on the lace runner. I told myself it was probably just miscommunication, that someone thought someone else had told me, that they hadn't meant to forget, that it wasn't personal. But now, with all of it stacked together in a pile I could no longer ignore, 3 birthdays, 2 holidays, 1 concert. It didn't look like coincidence anymore. It looked like a pattern. A pattern carefully stitched with plausible deniability. With half-truths and soft lies. With "oh, we assumed," and it must have slipped our minds. Not sharp cuts, just quiet omissions. Not rejections, just empty chairs. Like someone slowly brushing me out of the family photo, bit by bit, until there was only negative space where I used to stand. Still, I held on. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was reading too much into things. That families are messy, people forget, schedules change, texts get lost. I gave them every benefit of every doubt because the alternative was too cruel to accept, that I was being erased on purpose. That someone, maybe not out of malice, but out of quiet convenience, had decided my presence was no longer required. And still I showed up. I made the food. I set the table. I remembered every birthday. I wrapped every gift. I left my door unlocked. Because you don't stop being a mother just because the phone stops ringing. Because if I stopped trying, that would make it real. And I wasn't ready for real. Not yet. It was one of those gray mornings where the air feels too still, like the sky forgot what season it's supposed to be. I'd been sitting by the window again, half reading an old magazine, half listening to the hum of the refrigerator when the knock came. Not the hurried kind from the delivery people, not the neighbor's tap when she brings zucchini bread, but 3 slow, uneven knocks that sounded like hesitation carved into wood. I stood without thinking, the way you do when something inside you stirs before your mind can catch up, and opened the door. He looked older than he probably was. Early 40s, maybe mid, but with the kind of face that's been carrying something too heavy for too long. Unshaven, not unkempt, just tired. His coat was buttoned unevenly, and his fingers trembled slightly as he shifted a manila envelope from one hand to the other. But his eyes, that's what caught me. That specific kind of anxious urgency, like someone who's rehearsed something 1,000 times and is still afraid he'll get it wrong. "Excuse me," he said, voice hoarse. "Are you Martha Clark?" "Yes," I replied, and the second the word left my mouth, he looked down at his shoes like he wasn't sure if he should go on. "I'm John. John Lee. Haley and we used to be together. Years ago. I think Tommy might be. I think he's my son." He said it like an apology, as if simply standing there, saying those words, was already a betrayal of something sacred. My heart didn't drop. It didn't race. It just stopped, froze in place like it was waiting for instructions. He opened the envelope with slow fingers. I didn't move. He held up the first page, shaking slightly. A lab report, heavy with medical stamps and signatures, numbers highlighted in yellow. Paternity probability, 99.98%. I didn't need to read the rest. I've seen enough papers in my life to know which ones change everything. The second document was a scan of a letter, creased down the center, handwriting slightly faded. It was dated 12 years ago, signed Haley. The ink ran slightly in some places, like maybe it had gotten wet, or maybe someone had cried over it. She wrote about needing space, about going off the grid, about a complicated decision, and not being ready to be a mother yet. Then silence. 3 months, he said. She vanished, and when she reappeared, she was with Alex. Pregnant. Said it was his. Asked not to talk about it. And he didn't. Until now. He didn't press the papers into my hand. He didn't try to justify anything. He just stood there, letting me look. Letting me absorb the truth that had already bloomed like a bruise beneath my ribs. I didn't ask why he was here, or what he expected. I didn't ask how he found me. I didn't say anything at all, because I didn't need to. Everything inside me, every shattered piece that hadn't yet settled, just quietly shifted again. Not with rage, not even with grief, but with a hollow sort of clarity. The kind that doesn't need to scream because the truth is loud enough on its own. I looked into his face, this stranger whose blood ran through the boy I had helped raise. The boy I'd held as a baby, bandaged knees for, read to at night. The boy I'd baked cakes for, sewn costumes for, told stories about dinosaurs and dragons, and what it meant to be brave. I saw his eyes in John's, the curve of his cheekbone, the shape of his mouth when he spoke carefully. And I knew, and he saw it in me, not in words, but in the way my shoulders fell, in the way my breath slowed, in the way I finally looked down at the page and didn't ask to see more. Because sometimes truth doesn't require confrontation, just recognition. We stood there in silence, him on the porch, me in the doorway, winter air curling around us like a witness. No explanations, no anger, just that quiet, terrible knowing that leaves no room for pretending. I didn't react right away. That's not how I work. When something cracks in front of me, I don't sweep it up. I catalog it. I sit with the dust in my hands and try to see what shape it used to be. After John left, I didn't call anyone. I didn't send a single message. I just folded the papers he gave me and placed them in a manila envelope, tucked it into the drawer next to the photo albums I hadn't opened since the cruise picture. And then I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at nothing for a very long time. The next morning, I called Karen. She used to be married to my cousin's son, stayed in the family even after the divorce because she was the kind of woman who made herself indispensable. Smart, sharp, knew how to peel back the corners of a lie without making a mess. She practiced law for 20 years before going independent, family disputes, estate planning, mostly. I told her I needed a favor and I didn't want to get into it over the phone. She said to come by at 3. I brought coffee and the envelope. We started with the timeline. I gave her everything I could remember, and she filled in the rest. She pulled up databases I didn't know how to access, ran searches I wouldn't have thought to run. She took out a legal pad and wrote it all down in that tight, clean script of hers. Names, dates, locations. The day Haley disappeared for personal reasons. The date Tommy was born. The week she met Alex, some charity fundraiser downtown. I remember because I ironed his shirt that morning and joked he looked like a politician. Karen drew arrows between everything, connected names with red pen, circled overlaps. It all lined up, down to the week. Then came the part one wasn't ready for, but had already braced myself against. Karen leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. She had that look she used to get when a client insisted on contesting a will they hadn't read. Martha, she said, her name isn't Haley. I didn't speak. It's Rebecca Mills. Legally changed it 8 years ago. Before that, 2 marriages. Both ended with paternity disputes. Nothing concrete in the public records, but enough hints in the sealed court filings to know something went bad. First husband filed for annulment, cited intentional misrepresentation of parentage. Second one requested full custody. His petition included a private lab report. She flipped her screen around and showed me the citation. Not the documents themselves. Those were sealed, but the index was there. Names, docket numbers, dates, and that phrase that appeared twice, almost identical each time. Question of biological relationship initiated by petitioner. She read aloud the phrases that mattered most. Pattern of concealment, refusal to submit to court-ordered testing, unresolved discrepancies in timeline. And then she looked at me, not with pity, not with shock, just with that quiet, professional gravity that people like her use when they know something you're about to feel deep in your ribs. She's done this before, Martha. More than once. She uses pregnancy to secure a place in someone's life. She finds someone stable, someone useful, someone with a clean record and a warm house, and she builds herself a new version of the truth. I didn't cry. That part of me was gone. Whatever water I had left in me dried up back when the last candle flickered out on that anniversary table. But I did feel something else, something heavier than anger, colder than grief. A kind of weight settling into my chest. Not because I didn't see it coming, but because, deep down, I had. I just didn't want to know. I thought about the first Christmas she spent with us, how she sat on the edge of the couch and told me about her childhood, how hard it had been, how alone she'd felt, how this family felt like a second chance. I had held her hand that night. I had brought out the antique punch bowl. I had defended her when Suzanne raised an eyebrow over how fast things were moving. I had folded her into this family, stitch by stitch, like a patch on a favorite quilt that had frayed at the edges. And she had unstitched me in return. It wasn't just lies. It wasn't just secrets. It was the precision of it. The way she erased me, not all at once, but in pieces. Birthday by birthday, concert by concert. Moved holidays to different cities and smiled into photos that didn't need me anymore. Made me feel like the problem. Made me question my memory, my judgment, my worth. I left Karen's office with a folder. Neatly organized, tabbed, time-stamped. A whole paper trail of my own unraveling. It felt like I was carrying a funeral in my purse. But I didn't feel broken. Just stripped of illusion. Just clean. Like someone had finally turned on a light and all the dust in the corners could no longer pretend to be anything but dust. I went home. I didn't call anyone. I didn't tell Alex. I just sat in the silence and let it settle. The truth had come. And with it, finally, the end of pretending. I kept my voice soft when I called him. Not trembling, not desperate, just soft. I said his name the way I used to when he was 5 years old and couldn't fall asleep after a nightmare. Alex, I said, I want to forgive you for everything. He didn't answer right away, just breathed into the phone like he wasn't sure if it was really me. I told him I didn't have much time left, which wasn't a lie, even if I wasn't talking about illness. I meant time in the way a house means it, when the foundation starts to creak from things left unattended. I said, it's important. He agreed. They arrived just after 6. First Suzanne, punctual as always, holding a glass pie dish under foil, unsure if she should hug me or not. Then the kids, noisy and unsure of the tension in the room, carrying their coats like afterthoughts. Haley came in last, right behind Alex, one hand tucked around his elbow like she needed to guide him. She looked at me the way a fox looks at a henhouse with a light on, wary, but not afraid. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never really had. I wore my best blouse, the one with the little pearl buttons. I set the table like I used to when holidays still meant something. The good china, the wine glasses that catch the light just right. Napkins folded simply, no need for theatrics. The roast was tender, the potatoes soft, the gravy thick and heavy with thyme. The candles were lit. The air smelled like rosemary and citrus peel. I made it perfect, not because I thought they deserved it, but because I did. No one knew what to say at first. Suzanne complimented the roast. Alex asked how I'd been. I said, I've had quieter days, and smiled. The children, sweet and restless, kicked their feet beneath the table. Haley barely spoke. She kept her eyes on the food, her hands folded too neatly in her lap, answering questions with a nod or a single word. She watched me the way someone watches a fire they didn't mean to start, unsure if it would go out or spread. I kept the conversation warm, unthreatening, gently turning questions back to them. I asked Emma about school. I asked Lucas about his piano. I laughed at something Suzanne said about a client who brought a parrot into her office. I poured the wine slowly, refilled the glasses before anyone could ask. It was all very polite, civil, almost comfortable. But beneath it all was a silence that didn't belong to the room. It lived between the words, in the glances, in the way Alex cleared his throat too often and Haley's smile kept fading too fast. They felt it, even if they didn't know why. Even the children quieted, as if they could sense something older than them humming just beneath the surface. I smiled all through dinner. I smiled when they complimented the pie. I smiled when Alex said it reminded him of his childhood. I smiled when Haley offered to help with the dishes, and I said, "No, dear, you're my guest tonight." I watched her eyes narrow by a fraction. It was the kind of smile you wear when you've already won, but no one knows it yet. The kind that says, eat, drink, sit comfortably. I have all the time in the world. Because I did. I had waited long enough. And I knew now that silence is not always surrender. Sometimes it's just preparation. Sometimes it's the only thing left to say before the truth walks in on its own. I brought out the dessert like it was any other evening. A lemon tart, delicate and soft, the crust still warm from the oven. I had dusted the top with powdered sugar in the shape of a leaf, the kind of thing I used to do when the children were small and easily impressed. The plates clinked softly as I set them down one by one, my hand steady, my breath even. I didn't rush. I didn't fumble. I moved with the same quiet, deliberate rhythm I'd always used when setting a table for something that mattered. Then I walked to the sideboard. 6 envelopes. Cream-colored, heavy stock, each sealed with a small piece of red wax pressed with the letter C. I didn't say anything as I picked them up. I turned back to the table, took my time laying one in front of each of them. Alex, Haley, Suzanne, Nicole, Emma, Lucas. The children looked confused. Suzanne glanced at hers without touching it. Haley didn't move at all. Alex just watched me with a strange sort of tension in his shoulders, like he already knew that whatever came next was going to pull the ground out from under his chair. "Before you leave," I said, still smiling, still calm, "I want to share some family facts with you. Not opinions. Not accusations. Facts." They didn't open them right away. They just stared at them like the paper might bite. Haley reached for hers last. I watched her thumb hover at the flap, eyes darting from me to Alex and back again. I saw the moment she realized it wasn't a game, wasn't a misunderstanding, wasn't something she could laugh off or twist into a sob story. She opened her mouth. Alex didn't even look at her. He placed his hand firmly on her shoulder, not rough, just final. "Be quiet," he said. And she was. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It wasn't dramatic. It was absolute. Like a room with all the oxygen pulled out. No one moved. No one chewed. The children stopped fidgeting. Suzanne leaned back in her chair, so slowly I could hear the wood creak. Inside each envelope was the same careful arrangement. The DNA report 99.98%, signed, dated, certified. A scanned letter written in Haley's handwriting under her original name, Rebecca Mills, describing her intention to disappear during pregnancy. A timeline of her court-sealed history. 2 marriages, both ended under suspicion of paternity fraud. Case numbers, jurisdiction stamps, database references. Not speculation, not gossip, just facts. Suzanne's eyes flicked across the first page and then stopped. She didn't turn to page 2. She didn't have to. Her expression went hollow in the way truth makes things hollow, carving out all the things you thought you knew until only the sharp edges remain. Haley didn't look at hers. She kept both hands in her lap like a child caught in the middle of a scolding she knew was deserved. Her face had gone pale, and her jaw twitched the way it does when someone is trying to hold a story together by sheer force of will. But Alex didn't let her speak, and she knew, in that moment, that he'd already seen enough. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink more than usual. I sat back in my chair, folded my napkin into a neat little square, and rested my hands on the table, the way I used to when waiting for a prayer to end. Because that's what this was. Not an explosion. Not revenge. Just the end of a very long silence. And in that silence, every lie unraveled, calmly and precisely. Just like I'd planned. She left quietly. No confrontation, no scene. Just a dull scrape of suitcase wheels down the front walk early in the morning. Suzanne told me later that Haley had packed everything in a single night. Clothes, jewelry, documents, the small things that mattered enough to take, but not enough to explain. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. Not even Tommy. She left a note on the kitchen table, 2 sentences long, and even those felt rehearsed. I need time. Please don't call. No apology. No explanation. Just absence. Alex came to my house that evening. He didn't knock. Just let himself in with the key. I never asked him to return. I heard the door close and his footsteps across the floor, slow and heavy like he was walking through water. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood in the doorway of the kitchen, staring at the counter where I had set out 2 cups of tea I didn't expect him to drink. His hands were shoved in his coat pockets, jaw clenched too tight, and when he finally spoke, it came out in a voice I hadn't heard from him since he was 13 and came home after getting punched in the stomach behind the school gym. I don't even know who I am in all this, he said, not looking at me. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence fill the space between us, not to be cruel, but because I wanted him to feel it, the quiet honesty of the moment. Then I stood, walked to him, and placed my hand on his shoulder the way I used to when he was young and had questions I couldn't answer. You are my son, I said, and you are a father because you raised him. You fed him, carried him on your shoulders, kissed him goodnight every single day. But now Tommy will have another father, too, because he has the right to know who he came from. Both are true. Both will always be true. Alex didn't cry. He didn't break down. He just stood there, breathing like every inhale was a decision. He nodded once. Just once. And that was enough. We called John the next day. He came the following week. Not rushed, not dramatic. Just steady. He brought a small box of chocolates and a paperback children's book, the kind with dinosaurs and time machines. When I opened the door, his face held the same tiredness it had before, but something in his posture had changed. He stood taller, more present, like the waiting was over. Alex was already there, sitting on the couch with Tommy curled next to him, clutching a stuffed bear by the neck. When John entered, he didn't reach out right away. He just sat across from them, met Tommy's eyes, and smiled the way someone does when they're too afraid to hope, but doing it anyway. Tommy looked at him the way children do when they don't understand, but still feel the weight of something important. He didn't say much, but he didn't pull away either. He looked from John to Alex, then to me, as if searching for clues, reading our faces for what this meant. And when John finally said, "Hi, Tommy. I've wanted to meet you for a long time," something in the boy softened. He nodded, small and uncertain, and whispered, "You sound like my dream." No one spoke after that. There was no grand reconciliation, no speeches, no swelling music. Just a moment. A fragile thread of truth laid gently between them. And that was enough for now. John stayed. He didn't make a speech about it, didn't ask for permission or pity. He simply found a place not far from the park with the little red swings and moved in. A small rental with a crooked fence and a fireplace that barely worked, but he fixed it himself the first week. He got a job at the garage on Main. Nothing flashy, but steady. When I brought him pie on his second day there, he didn't say thank you right away. He just looked at me with that kind of quiet that means something's too big to name and nodded. We never went to court. It wasn't because anyone was avoiding responsibility. It was because the 3 of us sat down, John, Alex, and I, and decided that no judge could do what we could do with a bit of dignity and a lot of humility. Alex said it first. We do this together. Not for her, not to fix the past, but for him. And John just reached across the table and shook his hand. No lawyers. No threats. Just 2 men who were both fathers in the ways that mattered. Alex with the scraped knees and math homework and bedtime stories. John with the eyes and the blood and the long wait. Tommy was the one who named them. No one told him what to call John. It just came one afternoon in the backyard, while the 2 of them were building something out of sticks and duct tape. He turned around and said, "Dad, Jay, can we show Dad the rocket?" And that was that. No ceremony. No confusion. Just truth spoken plainly, like children always manage to do when adults stop cluttering it. My house is full again. The living room has shoes by the door that don't belong to me. There's a drawer in the kitchen filled with colored pencils, tiny scissors, and crumpled up masterpieces that I can't bring myself to throw away. Every Sunday, the table is set for 5, sometimes more, if Suzanne comes by with Nicole, or if one of Alex's co-workers drops in with their kids. I cook too much. I always have. But now there are hands that reach across the table and ask for seconds. Voices that bicker over the last roll. A boy who bursts into the room covered in dirt, holding a pine cone like it's treasure. And for the first time in years, I am not sitting alone on Christmas. This past one, we strung lights along the porch even though half of them blinked out by morning. Alex roasted the turkey, overcooked it slightly, and no one complained. John brought sweet potatoes with too much cinnamon and called it Southern style. Tommy drew name tags for all of us and spelled Grandma with an extra M, and I didn't correct it. We all wore paper crowns from crackers. We passed plates, passed stories, passed time. At one point, as I refilled someone's glass, I looked around the room, at the mismatched chairs, the stained tablecloth, the half-eaten pie, and felt something I hadn't in a long time. I felt home. Not the house, not the walls, but the weight of belonging that wraps itself around you without asking. A new family, built from scratch. Not perfect, not planned, just real. And that was enough. That was everything. There's a new photo on the dresser in the living room. I pass it every day on my way to the kitchen, and still, I catch myself pausing just to look. No studio lighting, no matching outfits, no one forcing a smile. Just Alex in a worn blue sweater, John beside him with his hand resting lightly on Tommy's shoulder, Emma and Lucas squinting in the sun, cheeks red from the wind, and me, right in the center, holding the camera remote in my lap like it was nothing, like it wasn't the thing that captured the moment everything finally fit. It's not perfect. You can see Lucas mid-blink and a streak of something sticky on Emma's sleeve, and my hair was refusing to stay in place that day. But it's ours. No one's pretending. No one's performing. We are exactly who we are, all of us, and for the first time in a very long time, that's enough. The living room is quiet now. Dishes done, toys tucked back into corners, the last glow of afternoon filtering through the curtains. I sit down with a cup of tea I'll forget to drink and open the old wooden box in the side table drawer. The one with cards and notes and things I used to keep because I thought they mattered. Near the bottom, beneath a faded birthday drawing and a program from Emma's first piano recital, I find it. A postcard, glossy and stiff, with a photograph of a beach I've never been to. On the back, in that familiar looping script, it says, "You will always be part of our family." I hold it for a moment. I think about what that meant when I first read it. I remember believing it. Needing to. I remember folding it carefully, tucking it away like it was something precious. I remember thinking if I just held on to it long enough, things would return to the way they were supposed to be. Then I tear it in half, then in quarters, then again, until nothing is legible. The pieces fall into the wastebasket like dry leaves. I don't feel sadness. I don't feel regret. I feel the small, steady warmth of clarity. I look back at the photo on the dresser. The crooked smiles, the soft edges, the arms that hold each other without hesitation. And I say it aloud, not for anyone to hear, not for effect, just because it's true now. Now I have a real family.